is Talking Heads on Manx Radio. Thanks very much for tuning in today. Politicians and Treasury officials faced some fierce questioning at a public meeting in Douglas last week to discuss what many see as a broken system of funding of those in residential or nursing care. Many people who attended the Manx Legion Club expressed their frustration over having their assets stripped to pay top-up fees. We discussed it the following day on Talking Heads and got lots and lots of comments from our listeners, although not all of them were fair, according to Policy and Reform Minister Chris Thomas, who chaired the presentation last week and offered to take further questions with us today. With him in the studio are Darrin, Oldam, Ross Stevens and Vicki McLauchlan. Minister, thanks for volunteering. I see that you've come mop-handed to the programme today. You brought lots.
Filled your chairs today. Thanks for having me in. It was a good discussion on Thursday last week. It was about helping people understand the current system.
Yeah.
There are issues. When you have issues, you've got to build a consensus about what you do about those issues. But at this stage, I think it's very important that people understand where we are, how things work in practice. And so I thought it was excellent that these officers could come along who really do understand the system, because we've got here the leadership team from Treasury, Social Security, and I hope they can deal with any questions you have or any of your listeners have.
Good. Well, and there you go. A lot of people said, oh, if we'd have known about the meeting, we'd have gone, because we're very interested in this. So, with lots of questions. And I think you thought that maybe some of us have got the wrong end of the stick about this. But the thing is that, I mean, last week I heard your comments about this, and you were saying that what you were looking for was fairness. And everybody that spoke to us last week on the programme said that the system as it stands is not fair. That's the basic problem with it. It's not fair.
That's true.
If you've saved up all your life, if you've gone without the expensive holidays and all the rest of it, and you've got a few quid in the bank, you lose that if you need care.
And fairness, there are all sorts of aspects of fairness. Is it between people who've got different types of houses? Is it between the generations? All these things can be characterised as being fair. And at this stage, what we want to make sure is that there's proper understanding about where we are, so that we can move on for political discussion about options. David Ashford would have been here today because he's the Minister of Social Care, and I'm leading a cross-departmental group which involves social care. Ralph Peat would have been here today because Treasury at the political level are very much involved. But we've only got 4 chairs in your studio, so only 4 of us have come. And it's not really me your listeners need to hear from. I think it's mostly the officers, because they have all of the facts, and I'll intervene only when there's a political question that comes along.
Well, yeah, the basic question is a political one. It's not fair at the moment. Is there a political will to make it fairer? You talked about having focus groups at the meeting last week, and it's all very well, consulting the public about what we think about things, but you only take on board the things that suit you as politicians.
No, that's not the case. The focus groups are both about sharing information about where we are and also beginning to build that consensus. So we're not to the stage as yet of having a formal consultation on a proposal, because politicians haven't as yet come up with a proposal for a political response. But certainly I can assure everybody listening that in July 2018 we will have a report about the funding of residential and nursing care going to Tynwald for debate. Focus groups are not consultation, they're about really listening and really engaging, and this is an important process because this is such an important decision that affects everybody across the generations with all sorts of different levels of income and wealth.
And what sort of take-up did you get last week? I mean, I heard the interview that our newsroom had done about it, and various people that were in the audience said, oh yeah, we're going to get involved in this. I mean, did you get a good take-up?
I think we are doing. Later on, Vicki will give details about how to get in touch for the focus groups. Very much welcome the participation of younger people, people from all sorts of backgrounds, because we're only going to be able to do something useful for all of us if all of us are engaged in the process of developing our report in July 2018.
All right. Well, I mean, you tell me which of your officers is the person to start us off on this, because let's presume that you get to later life and you need nursing care. You might own your own home. You might have a few quid in the bank. So what are you entitled to and what you're not entitled to? Is this down to Vicki?
It is, yes.
All right,
thank
Vicki.
you. OK, so the principle of the current system is really that those who can pay do have to pay towards their care at the moment for as long as they're financially able to do so.
So until they've run out of resources, you'll keep taking the money?
They will, until their resources go to a certain level, they will have to self-fund. Once their resources get below a certain level, and that's dependent on the costs of the care that they're provided with. So I can't give an exact amount, but once it gets below a certain level, they do get some income support to help them, and that income support raises as their assets and capital decreases.
All right.
For those who can't afford to pay, income support is the benefit that they would claim to help top up their private income. And what income support is, it's an income-based benefit that looks at their particular circumstances, so their costs, and those costs are prescribed in the law. So we look at a personal allowance cost for them, and then we look at a cost for their care. And then what we do is we have a look at their income that they have, which is made up mainly of state pension, personal pensions. They may have income from property that they may have. And then if they're in nursing care, on a universal basis, people are entitled to the nursing care contribution as well. So we have a look at their income and subtract their income from what their prescribed costs are, and the amount that's left over gives them an amount of income support that's payable to them.
Okay. So, well, but I mean, that's the detail of it, I suppose.
Yes.
The fact of the matter is that if you're skint, you don't pay anything. The state pays it for you.
Well, the situation is that if you have no income, then income support will give you the maximum allowable towards your care home fees.
Which is pretty expensive, isn't it? I mean, basic care homes are something like, is it 450 quid a week or something like that?
Yeah.
£900 a week if you need nursing care.
Yeah, or more, sometimes higher.
Oh, yeah, that's
the amount that is charged by the homes, but income support does have a maximum allowance towards care home fees, which does not at the moment meet the actual costs of nursing care.
So what makes up the difference?
There are some disregards on some of their income, so there are certain parts of their income we ignore for income support purposes, and then I think in the majority of the cases family contribute towards that shortfall, or they may have, for example, have a property that they're able to rent out to provide them with some income,
or sell.
But or sell, yeah. But it's really on an individual basis. Families make up that shortfall between them.
It's a horrendous amount of money. I mean, Chris Thomas, isn't that something that government needs to be looking at, the amount of money that is charged by these private operators? Is it something that should be in the private sector, or should governments operate all nursing and care homes?
There was since I think it's in 1998, 1999, government's been out of one of the sectors, and recently something changed a little bit, but that's a policy option. But I say politicians haven't in recent years made a choice about that. I suppose that's one option that will be on the table for politicians later.
Yeah.
I mean, it is costing us tens of millions in terms of income support for this, so it's a serious issue, it's a pressing issue, it's an important issue, but it's not an easy issue to solve. And at this stage I want to make sure that everybody really understands what's going on in terms of income support, in terms of demography and the like.
I don't know that many people who aren't directly affected by this, they might have elderly parents themselves and have suddenly found this out, that, you know, if they need proper nursing care, it can be £900 a week or more, as you say, Vicki.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, families just can't find that kind of money usually, can they? £1,000 a week, £900,000 a week.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the messages we got from the public meeting at the Legion, was that this was putting massive strain on family relationships, and you know, people were really struggling to cover that shortfall, and it was a real cause of stress for people.
Yeah.
So it is finding that balance between, you know, having your maximum allowances in income support rather than just meeting the actual costs of care, which could spiral, you know, and making sure that people are properly protected and can access the care that they need.
All right. I mean, in terms of the formulas, and I've read through the notes and the PowerPoint on this, it still confuses me. I was never very good at maths. But it seems that your first 13,000 quid of savings are safe.
Yeah.
If you need help. But beyond that, any property that you've got, any shares, land, investments, they're all classed as assets, which, you know, you are expected to defray at some point to pay for your care home costs.
It's right that any assets that you've got will a value will be taken from them, and they will reduce the amount of income support that's payable to you. Once your assets get to 13,000 or below, they won't have any impact on the amount of income support that's payable to you. But because there is a shortfall, many people were telling us they were having to dip into that 13,000 to make up the shortfall. So it wasn't a ring-fence fund that they would never have to dip into, because the realities are that the benefits don't at the moment meet the maximum, well, there isn't a maximum amount that the homes can charge, so people are having to dip into that 13,000. but they are no worse off in terms of income support for having anything up to £13,000 in capital.
And we talk in the Isle of Man, this is maybe a political question, we talk in the Isle of Man about tax avoidance rather than evasion, and that tax planning is very important and it's all quite legal. But if you plan for your retirement and eventual use of a care or a nursing home, then you, the government, can go back 10 years, and if somebody has signed over the house to the children or whatever within the last 10 years, that's discounted. It's still decided that you own that asset.
Yeah, what happens is if you've gifted or sold for less than its true value any property previously owned by you within 10 years of going into a home and claiming income support, then we will treat you as if you still have capital equivalent to the value of the property at the point at which you gifted or sold it. But what actually I think is not very well understood is that if you have gifted any other capital or any properties more than 10 years ago, Treasury will also look at that to determine whether or not that gifting was done for the purposes of securing or increasing entitlement to income support. So it's not the case that if you did it 11 years ago that you're absolutely safe. We would have to look at the intentions of that gifting to determine whether or not it was done for that purpose. And it doesn't have to be the only purpose. It could be part of the purpose of the gifting. And Treasury would make a determination on whether it was done for that purpose. And if it was, again, we could take that into account as well.
I appreciate you being honest about this, and I appreciate that you're giving us the basic facts about this, and it all feels a little bit Orwellian to me. So, you know, if I spend my entire life saving up by going without holidays and all the rest of it, and I build up a deposit account somewhere with a few grand in it, I decide to give that to my kids because I'm getting old and all the rest, and I want to give it to them before I croak. But then I need to go into a nursing home, and the government's going to come and say, you gave that money away within the last 8, so no, you can't do that. I mean, hang on a minute, Chris Thomas, it's my money. I can give it to whoever I want to, surely, can't I?
Yeah. But it's a political settlement that was made by politicians in the Isle of Man. This is an Isle of Man system. It's not a UK system that we've imported wholesale. Obviously, our system is rooted in the social care tradition, post-Second World War, Beveridge state. But that's why we're explaining it as it is, because politicians then want to know what the consensus is in our island, what we want for our system. And we need young people, we need middle-aged people, we need older people, because it's got to have to be, the solution is going to have to be politically acceptable to everybody, because it is all of those issues.
And I mean, the other thing that struck me looking through the notes on this is that the way that, and this is probably just government generally, but it seems that you use one set of figures when it suits you and you use another set when it doesn't. So, for example, the formula on saving, so you've got a chunk of money that you've saved, or you've got a pension that's paid out or whatever, you've got a lump of money in the bank, and it is decided that anything over £13,000, you're going to be charged effectively £1 for every 250, £1 a week for every 250 quid that you've got in the bank. I mean, that is effectively 20% interest a year. Nobody's getting 20% interest a year, but that's kind of what you're charging people.
I think you find that obviously, as the Minister Thomas said, those were set down when it was set forward. The idea at that time, and again that was the purpose of how they designed the regulations, was that it was an amount of money that reflected and that you would have to pay into, so it would eventually drain the capital. So it's designed to create a balance between what you will recover and the amount of money you'll have to make up from the capital that will fall. The principle, as Vicki said, is that if you can pay, this is the principle of the policy that was put in place, if you can pay, you should pay. But she didn't mention, because being Manx, she takes as an assumption, society looks after people who need to be looked after. So there's always the dangerous one when people say you want to compare two people in bedrooms next to each other, and this one drank and smoked and that one tried. At the end of the day, we care about that person who didn't have any money or didn't have enough money or chose not to, and that's a sort of social good that we do that for. So we should have a catch for that person. For the other person, the expectation, as again was set out, if you can pay, you should. The amounts are set so that there is a steady contribution. It doesn't immediately go away. I think one of your callers last week was frightened that we took everything off them, used that money, and then whatever was left, she didn't think came back to the family. It doesn't quite work like that. The money comes out as it's needed only. So help and put her mind at rest if no one else's. So it is designed to reflect that. It is a means-tested benefit. And yes, underlying is a principle that a person who has nothing a Manx person who has nothing should be looked after by the community, and that may mean us paying hundreds of pounds for their care, when in another case, my mother and myself have to make some contribution towards it. Isn't that part of the system that we should be trying? Certainly when the people who designed that policy, that's the kind of social good that they were aiming to.
I understand what you're saying. I take your point. But, what we're talking about here is that especially elderly people, as you get on in life, you start thinking about what you're going to leave behind for people. And I can imagine an awful lot of elderly people who would rather die than have their house sold from under them to pay for their nursing care. Whenever we talk about these end-of-life debates and assisted suicide, one of the big worries is that older people are going to feel under pressure to go because, they want to leave something behind. This is creating exactly that environment, isn't it?
We won't deny it. I mean, as the Minister said, it's sat there in the Council of Ministers programme for government that they were going to address this problem. They've put it through the Social Policy and Children's Committee, which Minister Thomas chairs. That's why he's leading it. And as he said, it's across government. Yes, that's another part of the network of making changes just in one small area can have detrimental effects, or not making changes can have detrimental effects. However this is addressed, it's going to be a compromise between a lot of competing demands, and the one you've just outlined that sits there as a fear in the back of people's minds is exactly one of those. And it's not something that can be decided by even the politicians. It's something that we have to have out with the population. These focus groups are essential, not because, and I think you were slightly contemptuous of the concept of the consultations before, that we'd have a sneaky plan up our sleeve and we'd find some way of making everybody accept it like some kind of magician. Absolutely not. In this case, we've got clear political instructions to get out and get them the information. And we're desperate to do so. We had to cancel a couple of focus groups because we couldn't find the interest.
Right.
We knew it was out there, and as the people phoning in saying maybe we should make more effort to advertise things, maybe we should make more effort to travel around the island, and that's a decision that the sort of communications teams might take.
Good, okay. Yeah. And you think you might do that? You might take this as a roadshow at some point?
Yeah, we might.
Yeah, all right.
And the question you asked me earlier on was about the costs of nursing and residential care. I didn't avoid it as such. I just wanted to keep us going on various things. But that's another issue that we've got to address because there are lots of safeguarding responsibilities, lots of care responsibilities. It is very hard to operate these sorts of institutions in our island or in any place, and that's another thing that we're trying to do. Is we're trying to develop a forum for providers. So if there are any providers out there who want to be involved in this process, we welcome that as well.
I just wonder whether or not this is something that the private industry ought to be involved in, because we're constantly being told that we've got an ageing population, so there's a problem that's going to get bigger and it's not going to reduce, and yet we're allowing people to make a profit from the situation, and that I wouldn't call myself a socialist, but it doesn't feel right to me, that somehow.
Okay, well, I take that point. The first question you ever asked me was I one of the politicians who wanted to soak the rich? And so I remember that. That's the first question you ever asked me. No, so these are all political questions that we hope to have some sort of consensus about in 6 months' time as a beginning of a consensus, and thereafter when we come up with actual proposals.
All right, fair dues. We need to take a break, and after that we'll look at some of the texts, and I think we've got some callers as well. This is Talking Heads on Manx Radio, and we're talking live to Policy and Reform Minister Chris Thomas and a team of civil servants, Darrin, Oldam, Ross Stevens and Vicki McLauchlan, about this whole question of residential or nursing care, the costs involved in that. We talked about it on the programme last week after there'd been a meeting at the Manx Legion Club, and an awful lot of people had a say about this. And today as well. In fact, let's go straight to the lines. We've got Howard on. Hello, Howard.
Hello, Stu. Hello, Mr. Thomas. Now, I don't know if yourself or any of your guests there can answer, but this is connected with family members. They were both elderly, both been married over 60 years, but one had a mild stroke and was unable to look after himself. The other person, again, quite elderly, but reasonably fit. And because of the nursing care needs, the person who had the stroke obviously had to go into care. So they sold the house, but the problem lay in so much that where they went into care, there were no double rooms. And they had to take 2 rooms at what would be the normal double cost.
Oh, I see, yes.
So that I asked this because they were both compos mentis, and I asked, and they said, well, there were no rooms where we could share. Although they'd been together over 60 years, they didn't want to go to separate nursing homes where neither or either could visit. But because they were both in the same building, they were being charged for 2 single rooms on a continuous basis.
Yeah, I suppose it's all down to supply and demand, Howard, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's not something that's going to stop. That's going to be ongoing. And there's going to be an awful lot of people in the future who have been together for a long time would be prepared to take a double room at a different cost than double the cost of a single room.
Yeah, all right, fair point.
One person there in that pair was receiving nursing care, the other wasn't, but they did not want to be separated.
Okay.
So good afternoon, Howard. Thanks very much for the question. Darren's going to say a few words, and I'll add something about housing more generally.
Yeah, thank you, Minister. I suspect, it's not my area of expertise, but I suspect it's to do with the requirements of the Regulation of Care Act 2013, which provides for sole occupancy of rooms. So it's not a benefits issue, and as regards from the provider's perspective, they have to comply with this act.
Yeah. Okay.
But we'll take, if you could leave details with Catherine, we'll get more information from the Department of Social Care and we'll come back to you. And what I'd like to say is another of government's work streams in our programme for government is about what we call extra care facilities. And this might be, and that's to do with housing and making the right housing available for people as they get older. And that's perhaps another framework for providing a better answer to you. But if you could leave a phone number or an email, we'll get back to you, Howard. Thanks for the question.
All right, thank you, Howard. Let's move down to Ballasalla. We've got Dave on. Hello, Dave.
Hiya, Stuart.
Yeah.
Stuart, I've listened to the team and I'm afraid they're totally out of touch. Absolutely out of touch with the real world.
Well, they would say that they're not, that they're in touch with it.
Of course they would. Chris Thomas can sit there and his colleagues and say whatever they want. At the end of the day, do they know how much it costs to keep a person in their own home in nursing care?
Okay, well, that's a good question, actually, because we talk about £900 a week to have somebody in a nursing home. So how much less would it cost?
I'm going to tell you, Stuart, how much it costs.
Go on.
It costs £2,500 a week.
For what?
Now, if you work that back from what the government have pushed over onto the third sector, the third sector are charging £25 an hour. If you've got somebody coming in to look after you for night care from, say, 8 o'clock at night, late in the morning, you're talking about £300 a night.
So
now,
this is
all the while being told we are getting more money to keep us in our own home.
Yes.
What an absolute load of rubbish.
Oh, okay.
We're not getting any more money, and it's time that Chris and his colleagues got down and met the real people in the real world and tried to live as they are, because they are struggling drastically.
All right, fine. Well, you've had your say on that, Dave. Let's go to the Minister and see whether or not... I thought that the basic question was going to be that it's cheaper to look after somebody in their own home than it is in a nursing home. But from what Dave said, I suppose... And I mean, is this because of specialist costs? Is that an average sort of a price to have somebody living at home? I would have thought probably not, but... Any comments?
Yeah, good afternoon, Mr McWilliams. Vicky's going to say something in a moment about care, because this is something that's come up at the focus groups. But what I would say is that in one sense they are separate issues. We're looking at the funding of residential and nursing care fees to do with things like top-up fees and how that's arranged. You're talking about care at home, which is involves adult social care, but it's a slightly separate issue. So you want to say something specific, Vicky?
Okay.
Yeah, I suppose in the focus groups, we did talk a little bit about, obviously, government's aim is to keep people at home for as long as possible, and people want to stay at home for as long as possible. But there does come a point at which, if somebody needs, for example, 2 carers to be able to move them, and they need to go in 3 times a day, where the cost of keeping them at home exceeds the cost of them going into nursing care. And again, I think it's something that we will talk about in the focus groups. And the idea of the focus groups are for us to come and talk to the real people that are experiencing these real problems,
right.
And find out what they want from the model, and then we have to look at, what could we do differently, and if we did make those changes, where would those resources come?
Okay.
So yeah, in terms of home care, we're aware that the cost of home care can exceed the cost of residential and nursing care. And what do the public want? Do they want to accept those costs on the basis that it's their preferred choice of where to live, or do we want to make a choice that after a certain point, there should be a decision made as to whether it's best for them to go into the care?
I suppose there is a sort of a crossover point, isn't there, where before that it's cheaper to have somebody living at home, and after that point, as Dave just said, it can be costing you $2,500 a week with specialist care.
Yeah.
All right, Dave. Hopefully that answered your question for now. I need to move on because I've got an awful lot of text that I want to try and get through. We all seem to be aware of the fact that people have to sell their homes to meet the cost of nursing home care once the savings have run out. However, could Mr. Thomas please clarify the position about houses held in joint ownership? Only one owner has to go into care. Who meets the cost in these circumstances, and is the remaining occupier forced to sell the home that they're living in? If they don't have to do this, then how is the shortfall met? And let's go to Darrin Oldam for that one.
Yeah. So when we're looking at support and we're assessing the value of people's capital, in terms of the property that the person who's gone into residential care formerly occupied as their home, we will ignore the value of that property if it continues to be occupied by their spouse or partner, by an incapacitated or disabled relative, or in certain circumstances by a former carer of theirs.
So you're only likely to lose your home or to have that counted if you're living there alone, effectively.
Yes, so there's nobody remaining in the property formerly occupied as the home, that's right.
Okay. I've got a question about dog licences there, which is a completely different thing. What's the point of paying a mortgage to pay for your own home and saving for a pension when the government take it all to pay for your care home bill, next to somebody who never made an attempt to save or buy their own home getting it all for free? That from Alan. I mean, I'll not ask for a specific response to that because I expect we're going to get a lot of comments in that sort of vein. Time to give Darrin some stick. Oh dear. Why should I work hard, save all my life to help my kids get a foot on the ladder, only for you Dick Turpins to try and take it? But you'll still look after those who are out in the pub every night. That's from Colin. I mean, it's unfair to ask that of Darrin because it's a political question, really, isn't it? It's the politicians to decide that.
It absolutely is, and I suspect I know the gentleman concerned.
Yes.
Thank you for that, Colin. We're back to the guiding principle which underpins the legislation. Those who have assets will be expected to contribute towards the cost of their care. It will be for politicians to change that, if indeed that is the consensus. Okay.
I mean, this is all means tested, and means testing was the be all and do all for everything as far as the Isle of Man was concerned a while ago. But you politicians seem to be a bit reluctant to bring it in, and things like commissioners' housing and all the rest of it. So when it suits you, you're very keen on means testing, but in other areas where it might be less popular, you're not.
Well, no, we have many benefits in the social security system that are means tested and have been means tested for a long time. In the last 4 or 5 years, we've added means testing to some other benefits like child benefit, and in housing, we've come into the end of the first 5-year fixed-term tenancies, and a decision will be taken about what happens to people once they no longer meet the financial needs assessment in which they went into those houses. Mrs. Beecroft, as a Minister of Health, launched a consultation on prescriptions, and there were things to do with changing the basis for aspects of health, particularly prescriptions, about which we've consulted. So I don't think it's the case that politicians are shying away from this. It's just incredibly complicated to means test. Personally, I know that it's going to involve some legal change, the development of computer systems, and also means testing raises issues like the ones being raised in today's programme. In other words, once you have means testing, some get and some don't get, and then there's resentment on both sides. So universality is sometimes the best way, and often, in fact, the best way.
All right, fine. We need to take a break again. We'll come back with more of your questions. This is Talking Heads, and our studio guest is Policy and Reform Minister Chris Thomas, who's brought a number of people from Social Security, Treasury, with him to answer your questions about residential or nursing care costs and the way that it's all done at the moment. And I've got loads of text, so let me rattle through them as quickly as possible, and short answers would be appreciated. If you made all employers pay national insurance, not like it is now, where the big boys don't pay national insurance on part-time workers, retired government economist here said it'd raise £13 million a year for the DHSS, Minister, or anybody who can answer that one.
Well, that is true. If you charge national insurance to more people, you get more money.
Right, okay. I mean, is that something that the Council of Ministers might look at? Or
exactly that. It's something that the Council of Ministers might look at. There are all sorts of options in different countries close to us, and they're the sorts of things that politicians would take as policy stimulus.
All right. Derek Call, Chris Thomas has just mentioned yet another consultation. Is there anything that they can make a decision on without supposedly keeping the public on side with a consultation? Well, focus group, isn't it? There must be hundreds of consultations out at the moment. It's never ending. The bottom line is, can they not just make a decision themselves?
We are making lots of decisions. That is actually what characterises this first 12, 15 months. We've been setting out a plan for what we need to do when. We've done lots of things already, and this is yet another thing that we're going to do something about, and we're doing it properly by building a consensus for the solution. We can't do anything until people are going to accept it, because it's based on consensus. Mrs May across tried to just do something without taking people with her, and she had to withdraw it a couple of hours later.
All right. What happens if I give all my assets and cash away to a family member by way of a gift? Who will pay for the care then? Well, Vicki, this is, I think we mentioned that earlier on. Actually, you can say, no, we're going to treat it as though you've still got that cash or those assets, because you can't just give your money away to entitle yourself to benefits, can you?
That's right. Yeah, we would we would treat them as if they still had the assets that they're given away. And we do have situations like this where families have to try and get the money back off relatives that they've gifted money to. And we have other situations where people are unable to access the care they need because they don't have the assets, the funds to contribute, and others where big debts are being built up.
That's horrible. I mean, just the whole concept of that is horrible. So imagine, you give your kids a couple of grand or whatever, and then the government comes to them and says, yeah, that couple of grand that you were given, we need it back, please, to pay for your mum or dad's nursing home care. Yeah,
I think really we're not really talking about a couple of £1,000s. We're talking about people that have given away properties worth a couple of £100,000. Yeah, if people are giving their grandchildren, a few £100s here and there for birthday presents or contributions towards a tricky month they've had at university, we're not looking to treat them as if they still have that capital. We're talking about large sums of money that have been given away either via a property or by cash transfers.
All right. Minister, this is a political question. Surely we've already paid for our care out of tax and national insurance over our entire working lifetimes, regardless of what we have in the bank. I think a lot of people share that view, that we shouldn't even be having this question, that you pay tax and national insurance your entire working life in the assumption that you're going to get a national health service, and that's going to include nursing or residential care if you need it.
Yeah, and wouldn't it be lovely if we had exactly the amount of money invested to do that? But it's not. It's a pay-as-you-go system. It's costing us 18 million on the income support budget. We've got demographics going forward. That increases substantially, and yes, we have an obligation to people who've paid in for 40 years. We've also got an obligation to people who paid in for 20 years, and we've got an obligation to people who are just starting to pay in. So we've got to come up with a system for the future that suits everybody. All right.
It's totally disgusting. The government needs to look into these costs to make sure that we're not being ripped off. Well, I must admit that the first time I heard that, and it was £700 or £800 a week then, some years ago, and I thought, that's ridiculous. You can go on a cruise on the QE2 for less money than that. But I think somebody justified it. One of the care home operators justified it and said, well, we've got to have a certain level of staffing. There's got to be certain qualifications. It's not just like a hotel where people come and go. We've actually got to physically look after people. So, I don't know that it is a ridiculous amount of money, really. Any thoughts?
Yeah. People might remember that 10 years ago, the Office of Fair Trading commissioned an investigation into the fees being charged by the residential and nursing homes on the Isle of Man. And that commission was carried out by a local firm of accountants. And broadly, what they found was that your basic residential home operators were just about making wage.
Yes.
And that the nursing home operators were getting slightly more than a fair return on capital, but there was no suggestion that people being fleeced or ripped off. Now, that was 10 years ago. Fees have gone up, but in contrast to that, requirements, regulatory requirements have increased as well. So I'm not here to defend the providers, but I think to suggest people are being ripped off might be a little bit extreme.
Yeah, OK. Minister?
But we could look at it again, but we do need to understand the costs, and we have got separate work streams looking at that. So as part of what we call the domestic economy investigation, we are looking at some of the sectors that don't seem to be able to pay very much money, for instance, and the care sector would be one of those alongside retailing and hospitality. So there are pressures, there are cost pressures. We've added to them in one sense by talking about by having raised the minimum wage and talking about the living wage. Safeguarding is a very important issue because that's about making sure the situation is safe for people in care. And government does have possibilities through the Office of Fair Trading. We would use them if there was any reason to use them.
If you thought anybody was profiteering. This is a good question. I mean, Vicki just said earlier on about, going to the family for top-up cost. Somebody said, what happens if the family say, no, he was a miserable old sod, we're not paying anything towards it? I mean, he wouldn't end up on the streets, would he? But, I mean, do you have any powers to collect the money from the family under those circumstances?
No, there isn't any powers. There isn't any powers on behalf of, certainly not the Treasury, but even the care homes as a blanket power. I think that there are instances where the care homes are asking family members to sort of underwrite the charges to the resident. But I think in general, where there isn't any family to contribute, it's an individual situation that's dealt with between the resident and the care home. We do not pay any extra towards care in those circumstances.
Interesting.
So it might be that comes out in the focus groups. What are the experiences of people meeting those shortfalls where they don't have family members to help them?
I think my kids would have me put out on the ice, floating away somewhere. What about an elderly person with no family? Sorry, I need to try and get through. What about an elderly person with no family but in need of nursing care has reached the stage where they've got no savings or assets left? What happens then? Well, at that stage, this is from Pam, at that stage, I suppose the government sort of steps in and helps out, doesn't it?
No, the maximum that would be allowable to that person would be no different if they do or don't have family members available to support them. So again, it's an individual situation, and I think that the residents maybe have circumstances looked at and discussions with the care homes about that. I really couldn't talk on behalf of them, but I think it'll come out in the focus groups, what's happening on an individual basis. All right,
Ross, I cut across you then. Sorry.
It's the same point on this one as well. It's I think one of your callers last week brought the point up. He was saying that are people who are paying privately contributing extra so that the homes can afford to take losses when they are putting up people like that? Because they don't put them out on the street. We don't have situations where people are suddenly have nowhere to go. Yeah. So yes, there's a cost shock absorber held in there as they run their businesses for those bad debts.
Okay. For years I've preached to my children and grandchildren to be thrifty and plan for the future. How wrong I've been. I should have told them to party and just enjoy themselves now, otherwise they'll lose everything when they're older. That's from John in Farm Hill. Minister, I mean, that is the overriding feeling that we're getting from people, that they're so unhappy that, we're all being told to be thrifty, to be careful with our money, to make sure that we can pay our way in society. And if we do that, then we're being, we're ending up, when we really need some help, not getting it.
Yeah, but I think Ross, 20-30 minutes ago, explained it very eloquently. Our premise for social provision is that we do provide a safety net at the bottom. Whatever you've done before, whatever the merits of your life and so on, we do actually provide that safety net. We can change that, but as far as I know, there isn't an appetite in the Isle of Man to do that. That's sort of the Victorian way of approaching things.
Okay. Robin Peel called. A lot of people don't know what benefits they're entitled to. It's a minefield trying to work it all out. There are lots of people really struggling. Benefits don't even cover their heating bills. Government's not doing enough. Well, is government not doing enough, or is it that that government maybe should be doing more to make people aware of what they're entitled to and what the benefits are under different circumstances?
And that's part of what we're doing today, I think.
Okay, all right. People will start to take their own life rather than put a burden on the children. The government will be to blame, says Gary. Well, I think I made that point earlier on. What happens if an elderly person has to sell the home to pay for the care but only survives for a month or so? Does the remainder of the money left over get returned to the next of kin? If not, what happens to it? That from Linda. This is something that came up last week.
As commented earlier, we don't take all of the money off them and then pay the bills.
Yeah.
They have to pay their bills as they go because we don't give them quite enough out of that money, so that the family or the person, depending on the situation, stays in control of their own money. And it is designed, well, the intent, again, if you look back to the policy, is to give people the choice whether they're going to pay cash, do they keep the asset and distribute later, or whether they're going to sell the asset and let that money go down. But a choice on the family rather than a choice made by us in government. Okay. We're not that Orwellian.
All right. Well, yeah, good. Many thanks to Chris Thomas and your other guests for their honesty, but the message to all hard-working Manx taxpayers is don't bother working. The government will take everything off you. Don't save, don't buy property, holiday well and party hard. That's Bert in Port St Mary.
That isn't the message, but I appreciate the feedback.
All right, yeah. Systems flawed. Why is Treasury making assessments on decisions you've previously made when the decision affects their involvement? It should be decisions made by an independent assessor. I'm not quite sure where that one's going.
I suspect that's a person who's going through the process where they disagree with us, where we have an adjudication officer makes the decision, then there's a second decision, and then you go to an independent tribunal. So there is an independent tribunal at the end of the route, but the first step is to get us to check our maths, if you like, to make sure we haven't made a mistake.
And the Social Security Tribunal works well. I've been along with constituents, and there are independent people there, and they have found against Treasury quite a few times.
A lot of comments suggesting that euthanasia might be the way forward as far as this is concerned, understandably. This one, Stu, do you think that everyone should have to pay by law into an insurance policy during their life to cover this cost so that everyone should fund their own care later in life? Now, that's a good question.
And that's certainly a model that exists in other nations.
Yeah.
It's certainly one that will be in the pot to consider. But we go back to the issue of fairness. So if you're a young man or a young lady in 20s and 30s, you're trying to get on the property ladder, you're trying to raise a family, you may never need residential care. Is it right then you ask that person to contribute to the cost of somebody else's care?
Okay.
Because the simple reality, Stu, is that we've got, I think, 900 care beds in the residential and nursing sector, but we've got nearly 18,000 people over 65. So it's not something that everybody's going to experience, but it is something that everybody's got to be involved with.
Okay. It amazes me what people are prepared to give up just to live an extra few months. Well, I suppose you've got to be there. It's a case of, you've got to wear somebody's shoes, really, to know, haven't you? We're completely out of time, but thank you very much for coming in. I've got lots and lots of texts. A lot of them are saying the same thing. It's the unfairness of the system, Minister, that people are bothered about, and I would suggest that that's what needs to be addressed. I mean,
Yep. But it's just fairness is different in everybody's eyes, and that's why politics is so difficult, because it's about balancing interests and balancing perspectives. So I hope we've got the goodwill of the Manx public, because we do need to build a consensus between the generations, between people who've lived different types of lives, and we've got to change the system. We accept that, but before we change it, we want to make sure that people understand the current system. Please join our focus groups. I think Vicki wants to leave her contact details.
Okay.
Yeah, if anybody would like to join the focus groups, we'd welcome that. The email address to contact is mine, so it's victoria.mclauchlan, that's McLauchlan @gov.im.
Brilliant. All right. For now, Chris Thomas, Policy and Reform Minister, Darrin Oldam, Ross Stevens, Vicki McLauchlan, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.